What if I told you that America's biggest attempt to crush India actually made India a superpower? I'm talking about a decision that cost America $2.8 trillion in lost opportunities and turned their biggest worry into their biggest competitor. If you think you know how superpowers are made, stick around, because this story will flip everything you thought you knew about global politics. But before we dive in, if you're new here, hit the subscribe button and leave a comment, "I subscribe," and I'll personally welcome you into the family. With that said, let's get started. May 11th, 1998, 3:45 p.m. India detonated 5 nuclear bombs in 11 minutes. The ground literally shook across 3 states. Meet Raj Chingappa. This 34-year-old defense correspondent for the Times of India had been camping in the Rajasthan desert for weeks, following whispers and rumors. When the earth trembled beneath his feet that afternoon, he knew he'd just witnessed history. His exclusive story didn't just make headlines. It changed the entire balance of global power forever. The Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty Organization recorded seismic readings of 5.0 magnitude. The world's seismic monitors couldn't hide what India had just announced to the planet. We're not asking for permission anymore. But America's response was about to backfire in the most spectacular way imaginable. Within hours, America slammed India with the harshest sanctions in history. 90% of US technology transfers to India? Frozen overnight. Defense cooperation? Gone. Scientific collaboration? Cut off completely. They thought they were teaching India a lesson. Instead, they accidentally created their greatest teacher. Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, the 67-year-old missile man of India, was running India's space program at the time. His rockets, his satellites, his entire operation depended on American components. When those sanctions hit, everything stopped. But here's what America didn't expect. Kalam didn't beg. He didn't plead. He smiled and said, "Now we build everything ourselves." That man went on to become India's president and the father of India's completely indigenous space technology. This is when India's greatest strength emerged, not their resources, but their resilience. America thought they were punishing India. They accidentally created their biggest rival. Now here's where it gets crazy. The sanctions didn't just affect the government. They hit every Indian company trying to work with America. Every partnership, every joint venture, every collaboration, gone overnight. Wipro, a small Indian company making soap and cooking oil, was just starting to dabble in computers. When American tech companies couldn't work with them anymore, you know what happened? They built their own software empire. Today, Wipro is worth $8 billion. Tata Group couldn't access American steel technology. They developed their own processes and became one of the world's largest steel producers. They now own Jaguar Land Rover, a British luxury brand that Americans helped create. But the real shock was in the tech sector. Wait, what? The sanctions actually made India stronger. Here's the data that'll blow your mind. According to a 2019 McKinsey Global Institute study, India's IT exports grew by 4,800% between 1998 and 2018. Not 48%, not 480%, 4,800%. Companies like Infosys and TCS exploded because American sanctions forced them to innovate or die. They had to build their own systems, create their own solutions, develop their own technologies. Narayana Murthy was running a small Bangalore company called Infosys with 15,000 employees when the sanctions hit. American companies couldn't work with them anymore. So what did Murthy do? He built everything from scratch. Picture this. Murthy and his team working 18-hour days in a cramped Bangalore office, writing code that would eventually power half the world's banks. While American companies were barred from training Indian engineers, these guys were training themselves. They were reading manuals, reverse engineering software, and building solutions that American companies didn't even know they needed yet. Today, that small company is worth $50 billion and helped turn India into the world's its superpower. If you've ever been forced to do something completely alone, you know that feeling, terrifying at first, but then liberating. But wait, there's more. The sanctions didn't just hurt individual companies. They triggered something called the India Stack, a massive digital infrastructure project that would make India the most digitally advanced country on earth. Nandan Nilekani, another tech pioneer, was watching American credit card companies refuse to work with Indian banks. So he created UPI, Unified Payments Interface. Today, India processes more digital payments than the rest of the world combined. More than China, more than America, more than Europe. While Americans were still writing checks and swiping cards, Indians were paying for street food with their phones. A street vendor in Mumbai today has more advanced payment technology than most American stores. But the biggest shock was still coming. America banned India from the International Space Station. So India built something better. Picture this. NASA spends $671 million to get to Mars. India's Mars mission, $74 million. While NASA was burning through nearly $1 billion, Indian scientists were celebrating with sweets that cost less than a single Hollywood movie ticket. NASA's own 2014 report admitted, India achieved Mars orbit at 1/10 the cost of comparable missions. 1/10. Let that sink in. But here's the kicker. While America was excluding India from space cooperation, India was quietly becoming the world's most cost-effective space power. Dr. K. Sivan, the chairman of India's space agency, started his career during the sanctions. He tells this story. American scientists wouldn't share basic satellite technology with India. So his team had to figure out everything from scratch. They couldn't afford the expensive materials Americans used, so they got creative. They used bicycle parts in their early satellites. Literally, bicycle parts. And it worked. That creativity born from necessity turned into innovation. Today, India launches satellites for 104 countries in a single mission. America's best rocket can maybe launch 20 at once. SpaceX charges $60 million to launch a satellite. India charges $15 million. Same result, 1/4 the price. Countries line up to launch their satellites with India because nobody else can do it cheaper or better. America was about to realize their $2.8 trillion mistake. By 2023, America had lost $2.8 trillion in potential trade with India. Trillion with a T. But it's not just about the money. It's about the relationships, the technology sharing, the strategic partnerships that could have been. Jack Welch, the legendary CEO of General Electric, wanted to invest $10 billion in India in 1999. $10 billion. But US sanctions blocked the deal. You know who jumped in instead? German and Japanese companies who ignored American pressure. Siemens from Germany now has a massive presence in India's infrastructure. Toyota and Honda dominate India's car market. These companies made fortunes while American companies were legally banned from competing. A Harvard Business Review study from 2022 found that companies who entered India after 2000 made 300% returns, while the same investments in US markets made only 50%. 300% versus 50. But here's what really stings for America. India started making the same products America was trying to prevent them from making, but cheaper and often better. Indian pharmaceutical companies couldn't access American drug patents because of sanctions. So they developed generic versions that cost 90% less. Today, India supplies 50% of the world's generic medicines. Americans buy Indian drugs without even knowing it. Indian software companies couldn't use American development tools, so they created their own. Today, those tools are so good that American companies license them back. Imagine missing out on Apple stock in 1980 because someone told you not to buy it. That's exactly what America did with an entire country of 1.4 billion people. But here's the twist that no one saw coming. The sanctions didn't just hurt America economically. They pushed India toward Russia and China, America's biggest rivals. When India couldn't buy American fighter jets, they bought Russian ones. When American banks wouldn't finance Indian projects, Chinese banks stepped in. When American universities stopped accepting Indian nuclear scientists, they went to study in Moscow. India and Russia signed a $5 billion defense deal in 2018. That money could have gone to American companies. India and China trade at $125 billion before recent border tensions. American companies were completely locked out. The Strategic Partnership Agreement between India and Russia, signed in 2000, was a direct response to American sanctions. This agreement gave Russia access to India's massive market and gave India access to Russian military technology. America wasn't just losing money. They were strengthening their competitors. But the real wake-up call came in 2005. America ended up begging India to be friends again. 2005. President Bush personally flew to India to lift the sanctions. Picture his face when he realized India was now buying Russian weapons instead of American ones, launching satellites for America's competitors, and building nuclear reactors with French technology. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice, the architect of the original isolation strategy, sat across from Indian negotiators in 2005. This 51-year-old diplomat, who designed India's punishment, now had to offer India a nuclear deal just to get their attention back. The nuclear deal America offered was unprecedented. They were essentially saying, "We'll help you become a nuclear superpower if you'll just be our friend again." India's response: "Thanks, but we'll think about it." The negotiation process took 3 years. 3 years of America offering concession after concession to get India back to the table. India had learned to live without America, but America was realizing they couldn't compete in Asia without India. Dr. Manmohan Singh, India's Prime Minister at the time, had this incredible moment during the negotiations. He looked at the American delegation and said, "You taught us to be self-reliant. Why are you surprised that we learned the lesson?" The country America tried to isolate was now making America compete for their friendship. But India had changed. They weren't the same country that got sanctioned in 1998. They were stronger, more confident, and they had options. China was offering better deals. Russia was a proven ally. Europe was more flexible. America was just one option among many. The final result will shock you. Today, India is everything America tried to prevent it from becoming. 5th largest economy in the world. They were 11th in 1998. 4th strongest military. Barely in the top 10 before sanctions. Space superpower launching satellites for 104 countries. They used to depend on US launches. IT hub handling 55% of global outsourcing. This sector barely existed before the sanctions. World Bank data from 2024 shows India's GDP grew 600% since those 1998 sanctions. 600%. But here are some numbers that will really blow your mind. India went from having 2 million internet users in 1998 to 700 million today. From 32 million mobile phone users to 1.2 billion. From producing 2% of the world's software to 55%. Their military budget went from $13 billion to $76 billion. They now manufacture their own fighter jets, submarines, and missiles. Remember, these were the same technologies America tried to prevent them from accessing. India's pharmaceutical exports went from $1.5 billion to $24.4 billion. They went from being dependent on drug imports to supplying the world with affordable medicines. Their renewable energy capacity grew from virtually nothing to 100 175 gigawatts, making them the fourth largest renewable energy producer globally. But perhaps the most shocking statistic: India now has more billionaires than any country except America and China. In 1998, they had maybe 5 billionaires. Today, over 140. These aren't people who inherited wealth. These are entrepreneurs who built companies from scratch during and after the sanctions. They turned America's attempt to isolate India into the biggest business opportunity in history. This is what happens when you underestimate someone's determination to prove you wrong. The sanctions that were supposed to last 2 to 3 years and bring India back to the negotiating table instead created a completely different country. A country that didn't need America's permission to become a superpower. And here's the final irony. Today, America needs India more than India needs America. India is America's key ally against China. India's tech companies power American businesses. India's pharmaceutical companies keep American healthcare costs manageable. The country America tried to weaken became the partner America desperately needs to stay competitive in the 21st century. So here's what I want to know. Was America's 1998 decision the biggest strategic mistake of the 21st century? Or did they actually know India would become stronger, and this was all planned from the beginning? Drop your conspiracy theories in the comments, because honestly, the truth behind this might be even crazier than what we just covered. And if this story taught you something new about how superpowers are remade, you know what to do.